specialized cells. So in our lesson today, we are going to discuss the fascinating and interesting topic of specialized cells. But before we do that, I want us to first define what the term cell means. Now, a cell is the basic functional and structural unit of any living organism. This simply means that cells are the fundamental building blocks of an organism. So each cell is going to have a specific structure to enable it to perform a specific function that is necessary for the survival of that organism. So in our lesson today, we are going to discuss the following specialized cells that are present in animals and plants. Let's dive into it. Red blood cells. So red blood cells as well as white blood cells are specialized cells that are present in the blood tissue. These are produced continuously by the bone marrow. Now, when it comes to red blood cells, we have numerous red blood cells in our body. In fact, we have around 5 million red blood cells per cubic centimeter of blood. Okay, to put this into context, let me just tell you this. An average healthy adult human being tends to have between 5 to 6 liters of blood. So the average number of red blood cells that are present in circulation are around 30 trillion. Can you imagine how many red blood cells we have in our body? Amazing, right? So what is the purpose of the red blood cells? Red blood cells transport oxygen and carbon dioxide to and from body tissues. This simply means that they transport oxygen from the lungs to the body tissues and take away carbon dioxide from the body tissues to the lungs for removal. As such, red blood cells will need to have a specific structure that will enable them to perform this function efficiently. Number one has to do with its shape. So the red blood cell has a biconcave shape as seen. The purpose of this shape is to increase the surface area for diffusion of respiratory gases. Respiratory gases refers to oxygen and carbon dioxide. So the larger the surface area, the more efficient the red blood cells are in transportation of the gases. Moving on to another unique characteristic of the red blood cell, the presence of hemoglobin. So hemoglobin is a red pigment that is present in red blood cells. This has a very high affinity to oxygen. What does this mean? This means that when hemoglobin is in the presence of oxygen, it quickly binds to it, combines with oxygen to form a compound known as oxyhemoglobin. So this allows the red blood cells to transport oxygen to body tissues. The same goes for carbon dioxide. Red blood cells also have another unique characteristic, and that is they lack nuclei. Now, I know as teachers, we tend to emphasize the importance of the nucleus. So the nucleus is the organelle that controls all the activities that take place within a cell. So why then would a red blood cell lack the nucleus? Now, the reason for this is because lacking the nucleus and actually a lot of other organelles provides more space for packaging of hemoglobin. So instead of having a nucleus and some other organelles, red blood cells have more space for packaging of hemoglobin, which allows them to transport oxygen more efficiently. Moving on to the next one, the white blood cells. So white blood cells are the soldiers in our body. Now, when you talk about soldiers defend territories from foreign invaders. And that is the thing with the white blood cells. They protect our body from bacteria, viruses, and any other pathogen, microorganisms that cause diseases. Now, white blood cells do so in several ways. We have certain white blood cells that are referred to as phagocytes. Now, phagocytes have the amazing ability of changing their shape. How cool is this? So what happens is that by changing the shape, they can engulf a pathogen, surround a pathogen and slowly digest it. Ooh. Now, another is that we also have a different type of white blood cell known as lymphocytes. Lymphocytes produce compounds known as antibodies. Antibodies neutralize the toxins that are produced by the pathogens, therefore protecting our body from microorganisms. Moving on to the sperm cell. Now, the function of the sperm cell is it fertilizes the ovum. So the ovum is the egg cell that is produced by the female body. Now, sperm cells need to have a specific shape. Why, you may ask? Now, this is because they need to move from this point across the female reproductive tract up to the fallopian tube where the egg cell is so that they can then fertilize it. And therefore, they need to have a tail. So the tail actually allows it to propel itself towards the egg for fertilization. Now, as you can imagine, this is a process that requires a lot of energy. And if we need energy, we therefore need mitochondria. Now, mitochondria are organelles that are present within cells. They produce energy through the process of respiration. Since sperm cells require a lot of energy, they are going to have numerous mitochondria, a lot of them, to produce the energy necessary for the propulsion. Another characteristic of the sperm cell is that it has a feature or a structure known as the acrosome. The acrosome contains lytic enzymes. So lytic enzymes are essentially enzymes that break down substances. Now, when the sperm cell comes into contact with the egg cell, it needs to have its head penetrate into the egg cell. It cannot do so unless it first breaks down the membrane surrounding the egg. This is where the lytic enzymes come in. So the acrosome bursts open, releasing the lytic enzymes which digest the egg membrane, allowing the head to penetrate into the egg cell. The nerve cell. So the nerve cell is also known as the neuron. This is the basic functional unit of our nervous system. Now, the nervous system consists of the brain, the spinal cord, and a network of nerves that are found throughout our body. So these nerve cells provide a pathway for communication of our brain with the rest of the body. Now, when it comes to the nerve cells, the function of the nerve cells is to transmit nerve impulses throughout the body. Now, as you can see from its structure, it has these long extensions that are known as axons and dendrites. What are they for? Transmission of nerve impulses. Now, as you can imagine, this process requires a lot of energy. You can probably guess where I'm heading with this, right? So therefore, they have numerous mitochondria to provide energy needed for the transmission of the impulses. Now, in our next bit, we are going to discuss 3 specialized cells that are present in plant cells. So let's start with our first one, the root hair cell. Now, root hair cells are found in the roots of plants. So as you can imagine, because they are found in the roots of plants, their function is going to be absorption of water and mineral salts. Now, how are root hair cells adapted to performing their function? Now, if you look at the root hair cell, you will note that it contains a lot of the organelles that tend to be present in cells. It has the cell wall, the cell membrane, the cytoplasm, the nucleus. It also has a sap vacuole, even though the sap vacuole that is present in root hair cells tends to be much, much bigger than in normal plant cells. Now, how is the root hair cell adapted to performing its function? Number 1, it has a projection. This projection is known as the root hair. Now, this increases the surface area for absorption of water and mineral salts. The larger the surface area, the more water and mineral salts that can be absorbed. So the better for the plant. It also has a large sap vacuole for accumulation of water and mineral salts. Now, another is that they also have numerous mitochondria. Now, when you talk about root hair cells, they absorb water through osmosis. Osmosis is a passive process. It does not require energy. But when you talk about mineral salts, they can be absorbed through diffusion or active transport. Now, mineral salts that are absorbed by active transports require energy, and therefore they have mitochondria to provide energy for absorption of mineral salts through active transport. Moving on to the palisade cell. Now, the palisade cell is a cell that carries out photosynthesis. It is the site of photosynthesis. So as you can imagine, because it carries out photosynthesis, it will require a lot of chloroplasts. Chloroplasts contain a green pigment known as chlorophyll. So the chlorophyll traps light to allow for photosynthesis to take place. So palisade cells have many chloroplasts to increase the surface area for trapping of light that is needed for photosynthesis. Our last one, guard cells. Now, guard cells are two specialized cells that have a unique shape. They are bean-shaped, as you can clearly see. So the function of the guard cell is to control the opening and closing of the stoma. So what is the purpose of the stoma? Stoma allows gaseous exchange to take place. Now, as you can imagine, if you're going to have an opening, it's going to allow gases in and out of the plant. Guard cells are found on the leaves. So when open, they allow gases, specifically carbon dioxide and oxygen, to diffuse in and out of the leaf. So how do guard cells control this opening? Number one is that they tend to have inner walls that are thicker and outer walls that are thinner. So these walls expand at different rates to allow the stoma to open and close. Guard cells also have chloroplasts and can therefore carry out photosynthesis, which influences the osmotic pressure of the cell. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all about specialized cells.